Sexual reproduction may be one of the most important innovations in the history of life. For billions of years, life reproduced asexually. A cell would simply divide into two identical copies. While this method is efficient, it has a weakness. Offspring are nearly identical to their parents. When environments change or diseases emerge, an entire population can become vulnerable. At some point, roughly 1.2 to 2 billion years ago, early eukaryotic cells developed a new strategy. Initially, these single cells reproduced strictly through mitosis, cloning themselves. But over time, a single cell evolved the ability to divide into specialized complementary mating types. From that single living entity, its biological counterpart was formed, requiring them to unite to pass on life. Instead of reproducing alone, genetic material from two cells could combine before offspring are produced. This new process created genetic diversity, allowing populations to adapt more effectively to changing environments. The result was one of the greatest evolutionary breakthroughs in Earth's history. Sexual reproduction eventually gave rise to the incredible diversity of plants, marine life, terrestrial animals, and ultimately human beings. Interestingly, the Qur'an repeatedly speaks about life being created in pairs. In the chapter of women, Surah An-Nisa, God says, يا أيها الناس واتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها. O humanity, be mindful of your Lord, who created you from a single soul and from it created its mate. A similar statement appears in the chapter of the heights, Surah Al-A'raf. Most classical scholars understood these verses as referring to Adam and Eve, and that remains the traditional interpretation. However, the Qur'an does not begin those verses by saying that a male was created and then a female from him. Instead, it begins with a single nafs, a living self or source, from which a complementary mate emerges. Importantly, nafs is grammatically feminine in Arabic, but grammatical gender is not the same as biological sex. The emphasis is therefore on a common origin before the resulting paired mates. The Qur'an also uses the word zawj, pair or mate, broadly, applying it not only to humans but also to animals and plants. God says, "Glory be to him who created all pairs from what the earth grows, from themselves and from things they did not know." In other words, the concept of pairing extends to plants, animals, and humans. Pairing appears to be presented as a universal principle woven into creation itself. But the Qur'an gives a deeper reason for pairing than reproduction alone. In both Surah Al-A'raf and Surah Ar-Rum, the chapter of the Romans, we are told that mates were created so that we may find sukun with them. The Arabic expression that tuskunu ilayha is often translated as that you may find tranquility in her. The root sakina carries meanings of dwelling, stability, peace, safety, and security. At the human level, this reflects the emotional companionship, affection, mercy, and family life. But from a biological perspective, sexual reproduction also provides another form of security. By continually mixing genes, populations become more resilient to disease, environmental change, and extinction. Genetic diversity becomes a form of biological protection. As life evolved, reproduction became increasingly complex. In biology, early reproduction was a light burden, asexual cell division, or spawning thousands of eggs into the water, required zero parental investment. As life evolved, a middle stage emerged with reptiles and birds, where parents began investing in nests and defending their eggs. A noticeable shift, yet still limited. But as mammals and ultimately humans evolved, pregnancy, childbirth, and child rearing became an incredibly heavy burden due to the large human brain sizes, complex social structures, and prolonged childhood dependency. While many animal species rely on producing thousands of quick-maturing offspring, only a fraction of which survive, humans have followed a completely different path. We invest heavily in fewer offspring. Human babies require years of care, education, and protection. Large brains, language, tool use, and culture all increase the burden placed upon parents. This is where human evolution becomes more than biological evolution. Humans also underwent cultural evolution. Knowledge could be passed from one generation to the next. Parents taught children, grandparents taught parents. Entire communities contributed to the survival of future generations. Modern anthropologists even speak of the grandmother hypothesis. According to this idea, postmenopausal grandmothers increase their grandchildren's survival by providing food, protection, and accumulated knowledge. Interestingly, the Qur'an highlights this multi-generational system. In the chapter of the bees, Surah An-Nahl, God says, God has made for you from yourselves mates, and he made for you from your mates children and grandchildren. The verse links mates, children, and grandchildren into a single chain of blessing and continuity. With this background, let us turn to Surah Al-A'raf, verse 189. He is the one who created you from a single soul and from it made its spouse, so he may find comfort in her. After he had shielded her, she carried a light burden and went about her way with it. Traditionally, this describes Adam and Eve and the physical stages of human pregnancy. But if we look deeper at the classical Arabic phrasing through the lens of developmental history, a stunning macroevolutionary layer emerges. This verse states, فَلَمَّا تَغَشَّاهَا, traditionally when he united with her, but the root literally means to cover, envelope, or protect. In the history of life, pairing introduced a vital division of labor. By shielding and covering the female from external threats, the partners shared the environmental load, allowing her the safety to nurture early life. Because of this shared protection, the verse says, حَمَلَتْ حَمْلًا خَفِيفًا, she carried a light burden, and she passed through her ways unhindered. In those intermediate evolutionary stages, like reptiles or birds, the burden was light. The mother wasn't yet immobilized. She could deposit her eggs and go about her daily life relatively carefree. But the verse doesn't stop there. It describes a profound shift. فَلَمَّا أَثْقَلَتْ دَعَوَا اللَّهَ, when it grew heavy, they prayed to God, their Lord. This is the leap to humanity. As brains grew larger and human childhood stretched into years of dependency, parenting became an incredibly heavy, complex burden. It required intensive long-term anxiety and care. Suddenly, parents could no longer just walk away carefree. They became deeply, consciously invested in the future and the moral rectitude of their offspring. Viewed this way, the verse traces a remarkable progression from a single living source to pairing, to the protective division of labor, to a light, unhindered stage of reproduction, to the heavy, conscious burden of human parenting, and finally to spiritual awareness and prayer. The journey from a single biology to human civilization required cooperation, sacrifice, and family. And perhaps that is why the verse ends not with a biological mechanism, but with the anxious, loving prayer of parents, deeply concerned for their well-being of their child to come. Alhamdulillah. May God protect, nurture, and shield all the children of this world, safeguard their innocence, grant them safety from harm, and allow them to grow into forces of peace, wisdom, and blessings for humanity.